and welcome to the Pig and Whistle Tales from Azeroth. As always here at the Pig and Whistle Inn in Stormwind, I go through a variety of subjects with regards to World of Warcraft. I grab a bottle or a pint, sit back and enjoy. This midweek episode will be going over the Rate My Dungeon series, and we're going to be looking at the second instalment of Wrath of the Lich King, and I'm going down the Atlas loot table at this so that I can keep a kind of record of it. We are going over Drak'theron Keep and Gundrak. Now, these are obviously a step up from Jolnarub and Old Kingdom, level-wise, hence why I'm explaining that I'm going through it via Atlas loot, because otherwise I would just forget what dungeons I've done. So, yeah, we're going through these two dungeons. Drak'theron Keep is a 4-boss dungeon that is both on normal and heroic. It's a very simple layout. The gear that you can get in there is good, though. The heroic plus versions of these dungeons basically have it so a pool of blood is dropped on the floor, and if the enemies stand in this pool of blood, they gain leech. So leech being if they hit something, they do 100% of that damage as healing to themselves, and this constantly stacks up, so it'll be 200%, 300% if they're in it for long enough. But there is a new part to this affix where any melee, or the tank preferably, would click on a green cauldron. And essentially this turns your character green for 5 minutes, and you're kind of just like turning the blood into goo, almost. Essentially you turn it from a red patch on the floor to a green patch, and this green patch, although you're told to never stand in stuff that's on the floor, is actually good for you. If you keep the monsters in it, it will deal 1% of their health as damage every second or something, and it will do nothing to you. So essentially you want your tank to pick this up always. There's green cauldrons scattered throughout these two dungeons, both in Gundrak and Drak'theron Keep. So essentially you want to keep a green character. Even if you're a melee, it's actually quite useful to pick this up, because it will do very small ticking damage to you. It'll do like 5% of your health every few seconds, but it really isn't that much, honestly. It's like nothing, negligible to a healer, in all honesty. You'd be pretty unlucky to die to it. So you have this affix, and it was one of the more annoying ones, because the visual for this red pool was nothing. It was a very faint death and decay, so you could see some like little bubbly like elements on the floor, but there was nothing on the floor. There was like no massive visual indication whatsoever, but they have updated it for the beta versions of the heroic plus dungeons compared to the alpha versions, which is really good, and it makes it a lot more, or just easy to see, easy on the eye. I mean, my vision's not terrible, but I couldn't even see the alpha version. It was so rough to see. I actually just kept an eye on their buffs, essentially, to see if the like pool of blood was down, but it was just annoying, essentially, and they rectified that, which is really good. The gear that you can get in Drak'theron Keep is very good. Obviously, all of this gear now from Ulduar 10-man has been filtered down into these heroic beta keys. So you can get Ulduar 10-man gear, and it's a really good way to gear up your ult. Now, don't give me this whole, but you need a good gear score to like clear these dungeons. You don't. You can go in there at 4k gear score and absolutely obliterate these dungeons. It might take 5-10 minutes longer, but you can obliterate them. They are so easy, it's ridiculous. People need to get over themselves with this whole gear score thing when it comes to doing the alpha and beta keys. Especially beta keys, because they actually made it like easier than the alpha version, which is a bit, ridiculous. But essentially, you're looking to just blitz through these and gear up your ults to be like raid prepared, essentially. So please don't worry about gear score in these dungeons. It's a ridiculous concept, gear score, and from my experience, the better players are the ones who obviously have lower gear score. I've seen people with 5k gear score do nothing, they don't try in the dungeon, but if you bring someone with 4k gear score, they're trying, they're really doing their best, and, they're probably out DPSing the 5k player anyway, let's face it. If they're like a rep paladin or even a warrior, they're not got a lot of armor penetration yet, or, whatever it is. So, it is what it is. For the revamp, there was no revamp in Cataclysm. As with all Lich King dungeons. So, Drak'theron Keep, honestly, since the update, I would have given this a 3 out of 10. Purely on the basis that the Heroic Plus version was awful in the alpha stage, but in the beta stage they updated the visual and you can like do something about the pools of blood now. So it's gone up to a 5 out of 10, but it's not the most engaging not affix dungeon in my opinion. There's some good mob packs to like pull an AoE down and it's all good fun, but it's very linear, very basic, nothing too crazy. Gundrak, it is 4 bosses on normal, 5 on heroic and heroic plus. It's a bit of a weird layout. So essentially think of it as a I'm trying to think. A weird arrow, like not a pointed arrow, kind of a U-shaped arrow. So you've got just draw a U, like a U as as simple as you can, and then just draw a line above the U. That's it. That's the layout. So you start from the right and go to the left of the U, and then you go into the middle at the bottom of this like eye or the line, and you go up to the top. Very simple. It's a kind of a funky layout, but very simple at the same time. So this is obviously a very linear dungeon at the same time because you have to clear these 3 bosses in order to essentially activate the last boss, because you need to click these stone tables behind them to bring down a statue that can like turn the walkway to the last boss, if that makes sense. So it's a very linear but a very cool concept of how they do it and how you access the final boss. The gear obviously is very good in there. Again, it's Ulduar 10 man if you do the Heroic Plus versions, and it's the same affix in there as Gundrak. So you have the blood on the floor, and you can turn this blood into a goo patch on the floor to deal damage instead. There is no revamp for Cataclysm, and it's a cool concept in terms of the way that it's laid out, but the bosses are really annoying. The first boss especially is so annoying as like a tank to deal with, because you're just getting web wrapped. These web wraps obviously prevent you from doing anything. You're getting punched, so you can't dodge, you can't block, you can't parry, you can't do anything. And essentially these snakes keep spawning, and it's kind of a race to the finish, or you just kill off all the snakes. But as holding aggro as a tank, it's really weird. You know, it's a bit of a ball ache, I'm not going to lie. So I would have to give it a 5 out of 10 just because the bosses are very annoying, but at the same time they do present a very decent challenge. Well, some of them, there's like the Colossus that essentially is just 2 bosses, but he just throws up a blob that you kill, and then the blob goes back into the Colossus, and you know, there isn't really much mechanics to it. It is just tank and spank with extra steps, or waiting I should say. But so I would give it a 5 out of 10. I'll give it a 5 out of 10, these dungeons. They're very solid and they have good gear. They have decent like mechanics and stuff, but ultimately it's nothing that we've seen before and nothing amazing that can stand out, essentially. But that is it for this episode. Thank you all very much for listening. As always, check out down below for the socials, Twitch, YouTube, constant stuff happening over there. Thank you all very much for listening once again, and go with Valor, friend. Goodbye all.